Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. The following content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim testimony given in federal court during the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Alb took the stand. No longer a celebrity, no longer a former entertainer, he emerged as a man with a shocking claim. He almost lost his life because he knew too much. In a courtroom already rife with scandal, his deep, cold voice rang out like a warning. "Another layer of haunting," he said, his eyes darkening as he recalled the final warnings from Kim Porter, a once bright, vibrant woman now remembered only through forensic reports and whispered rumors. Al insisted that her death was not what the public had heard, and that his own experiences since then had only reinforced his belief that the truth was being hidden. From a mysterious, unexplained coma to those final, chilling conversations with Kim, the pieces began to connect. Not in the usual way, but in a way that left the room breathless. Now he was testifying under oath, offering a shocking hint. Diddy might not only have committed a crime in broad daylight, but he might have been involved in things that had never been revealed, things that had been buried with the dead. This was no longer a musical story. This was a truth buried in the years, an inevitable confrontation. As Alb entered the courtroom, the atmosphere grew heavier. He was no ordinary witness. He was someone who had been deeply involved with Kim Porter, who had long been vocal about the suspicions surrounding his death. Dressed in a sharp, dark suit, his face tense and expressive, he sat down, glanced at Diddy, then turned his gaze straight to the jury. The change in the room was almost palpable. Before, many had dismissed Al's accounts as fiction, bitterness, attention-seeking. But today, under oath, his words carried more weight than ever. He began not with an accusation, but with a memory, an image of Kim that silenced the room. He spoke of her laughter, her spirit, her love for her children. Then, abruptly, he changed his tone. "Kim warned me before she died. She said, 'You're too trusting. If you're this open, you're going to get hurt, or worse.' I didn't understand it then, but I do now." Al continued that Kim had feared for her life, that in Diddy's inner circle there were not only enablers, but also possible threats. The judge asked him to continue. He took a deep breath, then said slowly, "I'm here because I believe that what happened to Kim was not an accident. And I also believe that the coma I was in, it was not an accident." There were gasps in the back seat. Al began to recount the events of 2022 when he fell into what doctors described as multiple organ failure. At the time, no one understood what had happened. He had been perfectly healthy with no warning signs. "It was like my body suddenly stopped working. One day it was fine, the next it was gone," he said, his voice low. Then he paused, emphasizing, "And it wasn't the first time I felt targeted." Al had tried to avoid testifying out of fear, according to court records. But now, standing in front of the court, he said plainly, "Silence is the real death sentence. If I don't speak up today, everything I've endured and everything Kim tried to warn me about before she died will be for nothing." Reporters crowded in from the hallways as it became clear that this was more than just a celebrity trial. This was an unearthing of secrets, old, dangerous, and long buried by the silence of those who had no chance to speak. Albie did not shy away from the question about his relationship with Kim Porter in her later years. "We were very close. We kept in touch, even though we were no longer lovers. There was a deep respect and then a genuine concern." But then his voice trailed off. "She was scared." And that set off a series of revelations that left the courtroom breathless. Al recounted one of his last conversations with Kim just weeks before her sudden death. "They were watching me. They were tapping my phone. I always felt like someone was outside my window." The statement caught the prosecutor's attention. It was more than a statement. It was the missing piece in a picture they had been quietly building. Kim, Al said, kept a notebook, maybe a diary, filled with details, names, dates, places. "If anything happened to me, it wasn't an accident," she told him, She was about to go public with information that would shake the entertainment industry, information about how Diddy controlled the lives around him through manipulation, intimidation, and stalking. And then Al dropped the bombshell. After Kim died, a private investigator he hired tried to recover personal items from her home. But everything was gone. Phones, laptops, notes, as if someone knew exactly what to erase. When Al went to the authorities, he got no help. I told them what Kim told me. I begged them to reopen the case. They laughed. They told me I was haunted, that I should get counseling. But that same day, a friend of a friend warned him, "Don't speak up." Not the police, not a lawyer, just someone who knew what was going on. These were no longer whispers circulating online. This is the official testimony with dates, details, and a silence that chills the spine. The prosecution presented medical records. Al was hospitalized for multiple organ failure of unknown cause. "I felt like someone didn't want me to continue," he said. "Kim didn't shut up, so she disappeared. I'm lucky to be alive." Asked about Kim's notebook, Al confirmed. "She told me she wrote it, that she kept it in a safe, but I never saw it. After she died, it disappeared. No one ever talked about it again." Then he brought up the events of 2022. One night in October, he collapsed. He was in a coma for more than 2 months. My liver, my kidneys, everything stopped working, as if someone had flipped a switch. A few days earlier, Al had met with a journalist to reveal what Kim had told him, but the interview was never published. And then he got sick. Al didn't stop there, and he mentioned the other deaths: Kim Porter, Andre Harrell, Heavy D, all of them writing books, all of them dead before they were finished. "You're telling me that's a coincidence?" he said, with barely concealed bitterness. And then came the previously unpublished detail. A few weeks before he fell into a coma, Al had received an anonymous USB drive. Inside were recordings, lists of names, timestamps, things he didn't fully understand at the time. But the drive had also disappeared while he was in the hospital. His home security cameras had been disabled that night. It was like someone knew exactly when I was going to be incapacitated. By this point, even Diddy was starting to look confused. His lawyer asked for a stay. The judge refused. Al concluded his testimony by reading a few lines from a handwritten letter Kim had sent him a few days before she died. "I'm scared. If anything happens, take care of Quincy. And don't stop fighting. You'll know when it's time." The room was silent. Kim's last words rang out, not just as a memory. They were an echo from beyond the grave, a warning, a call, and perhaps a truth that someone had long tried to bury. As the courtroom fell into a deafening silence, Al B. Shore cleared his throat, then spoke. Perhaps the most haunting part of his testimony yet. "There's a bounty on my head," he said, his eyes unwavering. "At first I thought I was being paranoid, but after everything that's happened, I call it survival instinct." He recounted the moment in early 2023 when a longtime acquaintance in the music industry warned him powerful people had lost patience with his continued snooping and mention of Kim. "I was warned, stop. Don't mention her in any more interviews. Delete your ambiguous social media posts. Forget the past. But I knew it wasn't advice. It was a threat." He began receiving anonymous messages. "Stay away. Be quiet or you'll end up like that." At first, he thought it was junk mail, until his brakes suddenly failed on the freeway, just a week later. According to court records, Al filed 2 police reports in 2023 about vandalism and receiving threatening text messages. Both were dismissed for lack of evidence. But now, under oath, he's spilling the beans. "I'm not saying Diddy directly ordered me to be harmed." Al paused, his eyes darting around the room. "But I will say this. When powerful people are backed into a corner, they don't do it themselves. They let their money do the talking." He went on to reveal another shocking detail. A former Bad Boy Records employee, not named in the documents, allegedly approached Al through a third party, offering him $500,000 if he would retract his previous statements about Kim's death and publicly state that he had no concerns. "I refuse," Al told the jury. "I couldn't live with myself if I did that. She means a lot to me. and my son deserves to know the truth about what happened to her. He admitted that he had slept with a gun next to him for the past year, hired a bodyguard, changed his phone number, and stopped giving interviews. It was like there was a shadow following me. I didn't have any proof, but I felt it, and now, standing before you, I know someone is listening. The testimony brought silence to the room. The prosecutors then told the judge, "We're going to present additional evidence of intimidation and witness tampering against Mr. Shore." The statement immediately set off a chorus of murmurs. If proven, it could be grounds for additional charges, possibly obstruction of justice. The judge then turned to November 15, 2018, the day Kim Porter was found dead. Prosecutors asked Al to recount everything he knew about that day and the days leading up to it. "It was supposed to be a normal week," he began. "We were celebrating Quincy's Netflix deal. Everyone was there, me, Kim, Diddy, the kids. Kim was happy, healthy, dancing with the kids, laughing with her friends, nothing out of the ordinary. But in private, Kim told Al she felt uneasy. "I felt like I was being watched again," she said. It wasn't the first time she had mentioned it. What made the trial even more shocking was the testimony about how Kim was found. Contrary to the official statement that she died in bed, Al said someone close to the coroner revealed that she was actually found in the bathroom lying on the floor near the bathtub. Not only that, he said, there were traces of blood on the pillowcase and a trail from the bed to the bathroom. Al tried to get access to the autopsy records but was denied. I asked why. They said the results were sealed. By whom? I asked. No one answered. The more I asked, the more they avoided me. Then came the details of the 911 call. The official records say Kim was found unconscious at 11 a.m., but according to Al, Kim herself called 911 at 2:43 a.m. that day. If she called for help at 2:43 a.m., why did it take almost 9 hours for someone to find her? And why is it said she died of pneumonia when she clearly called for help beforehand? Al ended with a question that had the room pondering, why does the report say she was found in bed when I've seen private photos that show the opposite? Whispers spread throughout the courtroom. The prosecutor suggested adding photographic evidence, photos that allegedly showed blood on the bed frame and a messy bathroom floor, to the case file. The defense objected, but the judge allowed it. Al turned directly to Diddy, his voice heavy with emotion. You know what she said to me, Sean? She said, if anything happens to me, protect Quincy. He's the next one they're going to go after. The room fell silent. In one of the most shocking moments of the trial, Al began revealing the tapes he claimed Kim had made herself. Kim had kept an old tape recorder in her room, he said, because she didn't trust phones, which could be hacked. She told me she recorded everything. The phone calls, the conversations with her assistant, even the arguments with Diddy. She said if anything happened, those tapes would tell. That was her insurance. But after she died, it was all gone. When I asked her family about her safe, they told me it was empty. Tapes, diaries, hard drives, all gone before we got there. Al also said that Kim had been quietly writing a memoir for years. She told me that this wasn't just her story. It was the story of many people. She wanted to expose the truth about the industry, about Diddy, and what it cost to survive in that world. Kim feared retaliation, but believed the truth needed to be told. She said that if she didn't tell it, someone would make up their story when she was gone. But Kim wasn't the only one writing a book. Al mentioned Andre Harrell, a close advisor to Diddy, who was reportedly finishing his memoir before he died of a heart attack in 2020. He told me, I'm going to tell the truth. That was the last time I heard him speak. Heavy D, another Uptown Records figure, died suddenly of a pulmonary embolism in 2011. I remember him texting me about his publisher just a few days before. Al looked directly at the jury. What do all these people have in common? They all knew Diddy. They all had a story, and now it's all gone. He concluded his testimony with a chilling sentence. I don't think Kim died of pneumonia. She died of silence, of keeping it a secret for too long. And I almost wouldn't be standing here. After a break, the prosecution continued by laying out the crucial details of Al Shore's near-death experience in 2022. The courtroom held its breath as he recounted the moment he woke up from a coma, surrounded by his grieving family and confused doctors. They said I had multiple organ failure for no apparent reason. There was no evidence of it. I just collapsed. For the first time in court, Al revealed that 2 weeks before he fell into a coma, he had been contacted by someone who claimed to represent an old friend, whom he later believed was Diddy. The person asked him to stop talking about Kim and offered him money in exchange for his silence. Al refused, and then things started to get strange. My home Wi-Fi was down for days. My tires were slashed. I saw a stranger trying to break into my building. He ran away when I noticed. Then I got sick, unusually quickly. Couldn't eat, couldn't breathe. A few days later, I was hospitalized and woke up a month later in the recovery room. According to Al, toxicology tests showed substances that didn't match any drugs he had ever taken. They told me I was poisoned, he said, but the official report listed the cause as undetermined. No police report was filed. The prosecutor asked Al if he believed it was a targeted attack. He replied without hesitation, "I think they were trying to silence me, temporarily, and I wasn't the only one. The people who knew the truth about that man, they're all gone, sick or buried." Then he dropped another bombshell. "Kim told me that she saw someone try to put something in her wine at a party. She thought it was a prank, until she passed out. She never knew who did it, but she's lived in fear ever since." The courtroom was silent. Diddy sat silently at the witness table, eyes on the floor, not responding to Al's testimony. The judge asked the prosecution to produce Al's full medical records for verification. He was no longer just a singer telling a story. He was a man who had survived death, standing up to tell what he believed to be the truth, that someone had tried to finish what he had started with Kim. The trial continued with the verification documents from the private investigators Al hired after his recovery, and it seemed that the mystery surrounding Kim Porter's death was beginning to be lifted layer by layer. Private investigators hired by Al in 2023 presented a trove of evidence that he was being followed by unknown individuals. From dashcam footage to store surveillance to phone location data, all pointed to one thing: someone was following him. Al insisted in court that the stalking was more than just random. It was organized, intentional, and increasingly brazen. "When I went to a screening of Quincy's documentary on Netflix, I saw a man in sunglasses filming me," he recalled. "When I looked back, he was gone. But then I saw him in other places. It wasn't my imagination. I know what it feels like to have someone who wants you gone." But what sent chills down the courtroom was a memory Al recalled of a conversation he had with Kim just months before her death. Kim had said, "If anything happens to me, don't believe a word they say. Investigate it thoroughly, and never let Quincy near Sean if you're not there." The prosecution played a never-before-seen voicemail, recovered from a backup of Al's phone. It was Kim's voice, sent a few weeks before her death. "I didn't want to text, so I called," she said, her voice cracking. "Something's not right. If I disappear, you have to tell the truth. Don't let them write my ending. We all know what we saw, what we lived through. Be careful, Al." The room held its breath. One juror wiped away tears. The defense tried to argue that the message could be interpreted in many ways, but the emotional weight was clear to the court. Al continued, revealing that Kim had worried that her phone was tapped. At times, she found hidden cameras in her home, devices she had never installed. Once, she discovered a recording device hidden in her child's stuffed animal. "And you think she died of pneumonia?" Al choked. He said Kim had planned to leave Los Angeles in early 2019 with her children. She wanted to retreat from the spotlight, find peace, but she never got the chance. Al concluded his testimony with a hidden project that could have cost Kim her life. A book, not the edited version released after her death, but an original manuscript that had never been published. Since 2012, Kim had been quietly writing everything down in a black-covered notebook, containing diaries, memos, names, dates, and even disposable phones with recordings. All of it was gone. Kim had planned to publish the book under a pseudonym through a European publisher. Al recalled that she had shown him a few chapters. One recounted her first time attending Diddy's secret parties. Another described his violent outbursts, something no one had ever dared to talk about publicly. The most haunting moment in the testimony came when Al read an email Kim had sent him. "If this kills me, please know that I tried my best. I don't want to be remembered as a model or a lover. I want my story to be told, even if it means waiting until I'm no longer alive." The courtroom erupted. Some in attendance, including women who had worked with Kim, wept. Al ended with a simple but powerful truth. She didn't want to be a shadow in someone else's story. She was a mother, a survivor of so much, and someone who finally couldn't bear to be silenced any longer. And now it's my job to make sure that silence ends. When Albie Shore left the witness stand, he was no longer a grieving ex, no longer just an artist, but a living witness, a person who had just opened the door to one of the darkest and most closely guarded secrets in the history of the music industry. As the lights in the courtroom dimmed and the people filed out, something lingered in the air. Not a sound, but an echo. Al's words were not simply testimony. They were a quiet tremor, rippling through the walls and empty rows of chairs. Even after the court had dispersed, the whispers lingered. They echoed like an unnamed truth, a secret awakened. Because what Al left behind was not just a story, it was the first sign of a door opening, and someone somewhere was surely listening. Imagine a solemn federal courtroom packed with reporters and all eyes on the action. Not a scene from a movie, but reality. An iconic figure from cinema, Samuel L. Jackson, takes the stand. This time, he brings not famous movie lines, but serious behind-the-scenes entertainment facts. This is a trial involving Sean "Diddy" Combs, one of the most influential names in the music industry facing serious charges. At the same time, veteran comedian Steve Harvey is also mentioned, with questions surrounding his role in the modern entertainment culture. Together, we will explore the details of the case, the testimony, and the potential impact on an entire industry. Samuel L. Jackson's testimony opened a surprising web of connections between Lori Harvey and Sean "Diddy" Combs' high-profile relationship, the new civil lawsuits threatening Steve Harvey's reputation, and a pattern of behavior Jackson said he had witnessed over the years. The next 20 minutes in the courtroom were a series of shocking moments, from Jackson's first oath of honor to the unexpected phone call transcript to a bombshell body camera video. When the final gavel rang out, more than reputation was at stake. Samuel L. Jackson, a man who had never been envisioned in a legal setting like this, became the central figure in the 8th day of the hearing. The case, which involved serious allegations in the entertainment industry, had seen a number of high-profile figures appear, from music executives to bodyguards to artists who had worked with both men. That morning, a subpoena that had been sealed had been released at the prosecutor's request. And then, the man with the distinctive voice and demeanor that had made a series of legendary roles entered the room, not to play a role but to tell the truth. Many reporters expected some token commentary, perhaps a commentary on the current cultural climate. Instead, they got a 45-minute news cycle in which Jackson linked Steve Harvey's rise in media, Sean Combs' influence, and untold stories about how personal relationships are placed in the complex context of power. He began by explaining how he came to have so much material: invoices, emails, text messages, personal memos. Jackson said that more than 2 decades ago, he vowed to protect his daughter from the systems he believed were harming so many young people. Since then, he has become a meticulous filer, taking notes, taking screenshots, and piecing everything together into a personal timeline. In 2018, according to testimony, an assistant who worked on a film set handed Jackson a thumb drive containing a short audio recording. On it, the voice said to be Steve Harvey was talking to Lori Harvey about what he described as the rules of conduct in the celebrity environment. Jackson said he thought it was just common-sense advice, until another file surfaced, this time a behind-the-scenes video of a private gathering, where informal comments were made amid laughter and camaraderie among the inner circle. From there, Jackson began to label the data, cross-referencing it with flights and public schedules. He said he believed that if a trend was going too far, authorities needed context, not just hearsay. On the witness stand, he presented evidence, including a sample of a document allegedly related to the handling of personal information, and an audio recording purportedly from Sean Combs describing a relationship as professional rather than emotional. Jackson read each document slowly and with emotion. To him, it was more than evidence. It was a reminder of his responsibility to protect vulnerable people in an ever-changing industry where influence and power can shape both futures and memories. Although the subject of control and exploitation in the entertainment industry was not new, the courtroom held its breath during the testimony. Even Judge Ramirez could not hide his surprise. Meanwhile, Steve Harvey, sitting behind his legal team, stared at the wooden table, as if searching for a clue hidden in the grain. The cross-examination did not lighten the mood. In fact, it made Jackson's testimony all the more pointed. Defense attorney Wickham tried to suggest that Jackson might have acted out of bitterness over not being signed to Bad Boy Films years earlier. Jackson responded with a casual laugh. "Your Honor, I turned down the offer because the script called for me to slap a 21-year-old intern. I later heard that scene was not cut. It was just edited out." The audience chuckled. The judge allowed it to happen. As Wickham tried to obscure the veracity of his testimony by drawing on online rumors, Jackson delivered his final punchline, a transcript of an encrypted chat over a secure app in which a senior Harvey associate boasted that this lore-puff connection will buy a decade of goodwill from Family Man viewers. The courtroom fell silent, and just then the bell rang for recess, as if to give everyone a chance to catch their breath. After lunch, the prosecutor asked Jackson to walk the jury through the so-called 8-step grooming ladder he had mentioned in several pre-trial interviews. The actor agreed, pulling out an old leather notebook he called the Red Ledger, a note-taking habit he had started in 1993 while filming Jurassic Park. "Step 1, he explained, is to approach through admiration. An influential figure will publicly praise a young talent as a triumphant icon. Step 2, he continues, is co-branding, turning admiration into an intimacy that can be exploited in the media, matching outfits, showing up at events together, sharing posts on Father's Day. Step 3 is exclusivity. Parental figures become the spokespeople while outside relationships are quietly phased out." Jackson links each step to Laurie's specific timeline. The first example is a 2017 radio spot where Harvey publicly praised Diddy as an iconic entrepreneurship icon. 6 weeks later, Laurie's modeling schedule was quietly adjusted, allowing her to spend time with the Bad Boy team in Los Angeles. That's step 2, Jackson says, the co-branding phase. He then produced an email chain in which Harvey's assistant requested that Laurie's scheduled photo shoot with Vogue Arabia be canceled, citing family obligations. The prosecution saw this as evidence of exclusive control, a step 3 marker in Jackson's scheme. But Jackson didn't stop in 2017. He took the courtroom back to 1995, before Laurie Harvey was even born, to outline the long-standing connections between Steve Harvey and the entertainment ecosystem surrounding Sean "Diddy" Combs, starting with the early days of Uptown Records. According to testimony, a young Steve Harvey signed a tour bus partnership deal with Uptown promoter Kirk Burroughs. In exchange for free stand-up comedy performances, Harvey received the opportunity to interview rising hip-hop stars, an exchange that Jackson said helped turn the hosts into unofficial media ambassadors and the comedians into promoters of a burgeoning cultural brand. Jackson then led the court to 2006, when Harvey met his current wife, Marjorie. According to testimony, she had a relationship with a prominent Memphis underground figure, Jim Townsend. Jackson cited a legal settlement from years ago that referenced an entertainment corridor that was allegedly used to funnel money through high-end fashion brands in Atlanta. He provided the relevant case number, and prosecutors agreed to introduce the document into evidence. Then came the surprising allegation. Jackson claimed that Steve Harvey's popular talk show had helped transform influential figures from nightclub personalities into social activists. To illustrate his point, Jackson showed a clip from a 2013 episode of The Steve Harvey Show, where Diddy introduced a scholarship fund for disadvantaged students, just days after a clip of a fight at UCLA had gone viral. In the video, the studio audience applauded, but in the courtroom, jurors watched silently. Harvey's attorneys immediately objected, arguing that what Jackson was presenting was nothing more than a staged Hollywood gossip session. But Judge Ramirez rejected that argument, noting that in RICO cases, patterns of behavior spanning years are absolutely relevant, especially when relationships and timelines begin to intersect systematically. Jackson ended his second statement by reading aloud from a 2020 Christmas card, reportedly sent from Diddy to Steve and Marjorie Harvey. The inside read, "Family is the ultimate form of brand bonding. Keep investing." He folded the card, looked directly at the jury, and said, "That's step 8, to fully exploit your legacy and reputation." A wave of gasps rippled through the already tense room. The transcript taker paused to change sheets. If the emails and notes had overwhelmed everyone, nothing could have prepared them for what came next, what Jackson called a carefully edited reality, a video slideshow of intimate clips collected from multiple industry sources over 15 years. The lights dimmed, a screen lowered behind the witness stand. Jackson personally led each scene, providing context for each moment. The first clip, a grainy 2009 iPhone video shot on a yacht off the coast of St. Bart's. Diddy, Steve Harvey, and 2 others raise their glasses to celebrate. A girl believed to be Lori, then 12, performs a dance routine guided by a female voice off camera. Jackson pauses on one frame, pointing to Harvey's smile. This is where admiration turns into fixation. The next clip cuts backstage at the 2015 BET Awards. Lori, now 18, is getting her makeup done. A crew member whispers that Diddy is coming. "Then make me look more grown up," she replies. Jackson asked the jury to note the precocious maturity. The third clip, shot in 2019 at a Manhattan apartment, shows a more mundane but equally controversial situation. In the video, Diddy is seen instructing his personal chef to plate a meal while an off-camera female voice, believed to be Lori, jokes back. The chef looks into the camera and silently shakes her head. Jackson pauses the video and explains, "The chef quit the next morning and contacted me after watching my speech at UNCF about protecting the next generation." According to the affidavit, the chef signed a statement of acknowledgement and submitted the video as evidence. The final clip played shook Harvey's public image. A 2021 Zoom meeting for his motivational tour, in which he was recorded joking with a producer, "There's no speech without a percentage." He then mentioned a financial contribution that was supposed to go to a company owned by Lori. Jackson let the clip speak for itself before concluding, "This is the structure of manipulation." When the lights came back up, the mood in the courtroom had changed. Several jurors avoided the defense attorney's gaze. Diddy took notes nervously while Harvey wiped sweat from his brow. The prosecutor presented his final brief, a sworn statement from Samuel's daughter, Zoe Jackson, which was not read in full, but the opening statement silenced the room. In it, she argued that her father's caution was the reason she had not fallen into a trap that, Jackson said, many others have not escaped. The defense had a final counter-argument, suggesting that the videos might have been edited, but the government's digital forensics expert confirmed that the metadata showed no signs of editing, and that the files had been extracted from various devices over several years. The judge accepted the evidence, despite the objections. Jackson left the stand with a calm demeanor, leaving the room as silent as if the walls had grown eyes. Outside the courthouse, protesters chanted, "Protect black girls." Inside, Harvey's legal team called a recess to reassess their defense strategy. Meanwhile, reporters whisper that at least 2 other famous fathers have contacted prosecutors, not because they know, but because they fear their daughters might be the next names to appear in unsealed evidence. In the fourth part of the testimony, the courtroom grew tense as the prosecution wheeled in a cart filled with boxes of bank documents, each marked with Vista Aviation. Inside were 27 sets of flight manifests, spanning 13 years. Samuel L. Jackson leaned forward, his horn-rimmed glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose, and began to focus the jury's attention on what he called a coincidence that is no longer a coincidence. He made it clear that when he compared these flight schedules with Steve Harvey's public appearances and Sean Combs' tours, a completely different story emerged. Jackson began in the summer of 2010, a time when Steve Harvey was reportedly hosting a youth camp in Chicago, while Diddy was reportedly in Europe. But Vista Aviation's transcripts tell a different story. A Gulfstream 4 jet left Van Nuys on July 13th, bound for a private airport near Nassau. On the passenger list, Sean Combs, Marjorie Harvey, and Lori Harvey, then 17. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. An alternate juror repeated quietly, 17. Jackson didn't raise his voice. Instead, he let the numbers speak for themselves. The years rolled by and the flight manifests. In 2012, a trip to Anguilla paid for by a foundation managed by Steve Harvey. The aircraft number was identical to the one often seen in Diddy's convoy. 2 years later, Lori boarded a flight with a group of entertainment associates and a stylist known for her bold choices. Jackson did not make specific conclusions, but he did draw a line of travel, from a secluded villa to a private yacht to high-profile events in Tulum, that he said was identical to what had been described in a high-profile civil lawsuit. Midway through their presentation, prosecutors turned to electronic evidence. A split-screen map appeared. The left side showed the airtime of Harvey's popular radio show, advertised as being broadcast live from Atlanta. But the right side showed a sequence of cell phone signals emanating from a cell tower in Anguilla at the same time. The segments were pre-recorded, timed so the host could be elsewhere, Jackson explained. When asked to imply that the reason was to monitor his daughter's travels, the defense objected, calling it speculation. The judge dismissed it, confirming that the data from the phone records was admissible under the law. Jackson's voice did not waver. After he finished, he closed the transcript, turned to the jury, and said, "The question is no longer whether these trips were real. The question is, what would have caused a 50-year-old man and a revered comedian to keep these trips secret?" As the court adjourned for lunch, the atmosphere became less like a trial and more like an in-depth audit. The collection of flights not only retraced the map of showbiz friendships, but also triggered a chain of events that needed to be thoroughly examined. Throughout, Samuel L. Jackson was no ordinary Hollywood star. He emerged as the guardian of memory and truth, quiet, detailed, and uncompromising. In the dimmed light after lunch, a technician quietly slid in a 50-inch screen. Samuel settled into a chair, a slim remote in hand, and began playing the clip with remarkable care. The video had been recorded on September 3, 2018, just 2 weeks before Lori Harvey's 22nd birthday. It had taken place at a secluded rental outside Martha's Vineyard, coded internally as White Rabbit. The only words from Mr. Combs' secure email echoed in the silence. Jackson pressed play. A hazy nighttime image of a poolside cabana appeared on the screen, apparently captured by a wall-mounted security camera. Subtitles played underneath, mimicking the sound of dialogue distorted by the hum of a generator. Diddy's voice came first. "Give me the LV bag, Faheim." Jackson repeats the name with a double E as if to correct a witness who had mispronounced it. Then Steve Harvey's deep, unmistakable laugh rings out. "You idiot!" A layer of background noise blends into the tape. The words, "wash her and get her makeup done," flash like an alarm, blaring through the static. Though less than 45 seconds long, the clip reveals explosive details. The audience is so agitated that an officer has to signal for order. Jackson doesn't appear triumphant. He calmly guides the sequence of events. A former estate manager reveals that Harvey's team did not disable the Cabana camera system. Under Jackson's direction, the phrase "wash her" is linked to Cassie and Dawn Richards' accounts of post-panic rituals. Women were required to bathe in eucalyptus oil before re-emerging, ready for the camera. Even more chilling was the presence of Steve Harvey. He was not only aware of the situation, but also clearly involved, standing near a bag later seized by Homeland Security, which contained sedatives and a prepaid Visa card. The defense tried to fight back. They mentioned the possibility of video manipulation, questioned the reliability of the time codes, and even suggested that Steve Harvey might just be a hologram in the skit. Yet the jury was unmoved. Their faces were expressionless, taking notes every time Harvey's image reappeared. Samuel L. Jackson remained calm. He cited metadata from the phone that placed Harvey in Martha's Vineyard that night. Additionally, Venmo transaction records showed a $4,800 payment from Harvey LLC to the mansion address. Jackson then read a text message Lori had sent her best friend the morning after the reunion. "Puff says your smile is worth its weight in gold. Dad keeps saying ownership is everything. I feel like property." No one in the room moved. When the moderator called for a recess, the Vineyard tape was no longer hearsay. It became live, visual evidence, a stark contrast to the family values Steve Harvey had preached in books and on television. In those 12 chilling minutes, the courtroom's order had changed. When the hearing resumed, Samuel turned to a larger target. He brought up the Winan Clause, a forgotten addendum buried deep in the multi-platform agreement Steve Harvey had signed with Endeavor Content in 2017. Jackson held up a copy of the contract, Section 16C highlighted in red, which granted Endeavor first access to Harvey-branded religious television programming, with a provision that gave strategic partners in Combs's entertainment portfolio priority funding and a share of the profits. In other words, Harvey's burgeoning streaming empire relied on Diddy's financial backing to survive. Jackson didn't just lay it out, he walked the jury through the specific implications of the clause. He gave the example of a documentary series about contemporary gospel groups that stalled in 2019 until Bad Boy Ventures pumped in $2 million. The series later debuted on a Diddy-sponsored FAST channel, but only after it was rebranded as Asterisk Sunday Services Praise Legacy Asterisk, synced with Kanye-branded choir visuals. Another tie-in that showed Diddy's expansive reach. But what did it have to do with Lori? Here, Samuel shows internal emails in which Harvey's finance manager stresses the importance of keeping a close bond with Mr. Combs to ensure future investment. One line stands out. L's company remains a symbol of stability. At that moment, Jackson pauses, letting the word company hang in the air. He says it's soft language for what the prosecution believes is a form of coercion painted with beautiful language. Jackson then quotes the testimony of a former chef who worked for the Harveys. The testimony details a rehearsal dinner for a gala in 2019, where Lori was instructed to wear a white Tom Ford suit. No lining, because, the chef said, the guests loved her natural silhouette. Who gave the orders? The chef says it was Marjorie Harvey, based on advice from Diddy's hairstylist. The defense immediately objected, questioning the connection. Jackson stood firm. "Connected?" he insisted. "We have demonstrated Harvey's financial dependence on the Combs system. Now it is time to expose the concessions, both visual and behavioral, that took place within Harvey's own family." The judge allowed the matter to continue, and Jackson began his brief. The Winan Clause, he insisted, had created a financial pipeline where money for the spiritual programs would flow only if the Harvey brand maintained its closeness to Diddy. That reputation, the contract read, required Lori's regular presence at Combs's curated social events. This was no longer a creative arrangement. It was a control structure. At the end of season 6, Samuel pivoted back to his role as a parent, specifically as a father. He played the viral clip where Steve Harvey advised fathers to guard the gate of their daughters. He then contrasted that with the contract evidence, making his daughter's very presence a negotiable provision. "The gate," Jackson said, "is rented by the hour, Your Honor, and the owner is sitting at the defendant's table." A collective gasp filled the room as he gathered up the documents. A murmur of astonishment followed him back to the table. The day ended with the press racing to report the headline. Samuel L. Jackson links faith deal to alleged commercial pipeline. As parts 4 through 6 rolled around, the allegations slowly shattered the illusion that this was just celebrity gossip. The story now read like a spiritual Ponzi scheme, built from jet receipts, forgotten cameras, and a clause named after a gospel royalty. And Samuel L. Jackson, the court narrator, laid bare the motives behind it in one clean cut. The silence that followed his testimony did not last long. Lead attorney Brian Steele, representing Diddy, strutted to the stand with the confidence of someone who believes that glamour can obscure the truth. He began with a personal counterattack. "Mr. Jackson, you've played heroes who have transcended reality. Aren't you playing another one today?" Samuel folded his arms and said in a low voice, "Your Honor, no role is ever repeated in a federal courtroom." Steele showed a slideshow of entertainment galas where Jackson and Combs had appeared together. "You've toasted his champagne, walked his red carpet. Now you call him a predator." Jackson was unfazed. He admitted he was there for business, then clarified, "I was there to promote a movie, not to lecture him on how to treat young women backstage." Steele turned to Steve Harvey, trying to reduce the parenting claims to speculation, not evidence. "You never met Lori Harvey personally, did you?" he asked. Samuel nodded. "Yes, and that's why I hold her father responsible, not her." A soft gasp passed through the courtroom, not because it was sensational, but because it was too real. The defense's final move was a string of emails in which Harvey allegedly thanked Jackson for his advice about family in Hollywood. Steele wanted to make it seem like Jackson was betraying his personal connection after the Diddy scandal broke. But the emails lacked context, and Jackson seized the opportunity. "Exactly," he said. "I advised Steve about setting boundaries. He chose to ignore them, as did your client." Judge Morales sustained most of the defense's formal objections, but allowed the core arguments to remain. When Steele's argument ended, Jackson stood tall, looked at the jury, and left a heavy closing sentence. "I'm not here because of the rumors. I'm here because the silence has become too loud." Even the stenographer paused for a moment, as if sensing the weight of the words. Then Assistant U.S. Attorney Ramirez stepped up, calling his next piece of evidence, a mislabeled DAT tape found in an abandoned storage facility, once rented by a former, now-fired employee. The lights in the courtroom dimmed and a tense silence filled the air. Over the loudspeaker, Samuel's unmistakable voice rang out. "Puff, why did you bring minors into this?" A deep, muffled voice, clearly Diddy's, sneered. "They're old enough to do what I need them to do." Whispers, clinking glasses, and a sudden cut to the music as the tape was cut. Ramirez asked Jackson to confirm the authenticity of the tape. He nodded, explaining that it was recorded in 2003 at an after-hours studio in Midtown, nicknamed Studio 23. He had brought a pocket recorder with him after witnessing the escalation. "I thought if something went wrong, this would be important," he told the jury. But for years, he kept it because no one wanted to hear the ugly background music behind the flashy videos. The defense immediately objected, asking for the evidence to be excluded on the grounds of chain of custody and sabotage. Judge Morales rejected it, saying the jury would judge its credibility. Then Jackson dropped a bombshell. The laughter on the tape belonged to Diddy's teenage son, Justin Combs. "That night I realized this cycle was passed down through the generations," he said, and Steve Harvey was preparing to put his daughter through the same machine. The prosecution used the recording to build a pattern of behavior. Diddy cultivated relationships with young people, normalized unlimited partying, and relied on silence bought by privilege. Jackson testified that later in the limousine, Puff bragged, "Hollywood dads give me gifts, I make them sparkle." The statement shook the courtroom, especially given the evidence of a Cartier bracelet Diddy sent Lori around that time. As the tape crackled, the jury exchanged questioning glances. The music mogul's glamorous image faded, replaced by the hissing sound of predatory behavior recorded in secret, a damning relic that no one wanted to expose. With the recording admitted, the prosecution continued to lay bare the social, psychological, and multi-generational damage. Jackson testified that after publicly criticizing Harvey's parenting, he was shunned by industry gatekeepers. Projects stalled, calls went unanswered, and invitations to charity events disappeared at the last minute. Such was the price of truth in a shadowy environment. He recounted a 2021 backstage encounter with Steve Harvey at a charity golf tournament. Harvey allegedly said, "Dude, you lost me sponsorship money." Jackson responded, "No, you lost my daughter's trust." The jury scribbled notes, and even the judge looked a little alarmed. At the end of his testimony, Jackson showed him an encrypted message sent to him a few days earlier. A screenshot appeared on the courtroom screen. Diddy sent Harvey a message that read, "Sam is on the warpath. Remind your daughter of the NDA." The courtroom erupted in response. Morales ordered a silence. Despite the defense's objections, the judge, after reviewing the camera's metadata, allowed limited discussion. Ramirez used the episode to demonstrate Diddy's sense of guilt, not just fear of exposure, but also his order to Harvey to maintain his silence. Jackson closed his testimony with a blunt plea. "I can't undo what these men did, but I'm not going to let it be hidden behind charts or royalties any longer." As he left the stand, reporters rushed into the hallway to record the moment. Diddy, his face as stony as ice, whispered to the panel, while Harvey, who was there by summons, looked down at the floor. Outside the courthouse, commentators called the day a historic turning point. Diddy's music streams plummeted, advertisers quietly withdrew from Harvey's properties. On social media, hashtags went viral. "Listen to Sam, protect Black daughters." The silence had been broken. In the courtroom, the jury was no longer bystanders, but instead left with the police, eyes wide, notebooks filled with the words that would shape the arguments to come. Tomorrow, the government would call in financial experts to trace the money, but everyone knew the real value had changed hands. It was the raw prestige of a seasoned politician who was not afraid to burn decades of friendships in exchange for transparency and accountability. And with the final echoes of that statement still ringing under the soaring ceiling, the trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs moved closer to a result that could rewrite the definition of celebrity power and parental failure for a generation. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully, the information and stories shared have given you insight and usefulness. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I really appreciate your companionship. See you in the next videos. The recent federal trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs has garnered intense media and public attention. One of the most surprising moments came when Chewy Thompson, who claims to be the grandson of music legend Elvis Presley, took the stand. His testimony, which was reportedly transcribed by inner-city press, brought the courtroom to a standstill. Under oath, Chewy shared previously unknown stories about his grandfather's mysterious life and remarkable connections to Sean Combs' family. While the veracity of what he told has yet to be verified, it raises some big questions, not just about celebrities, but about the dark side of the entertainment industry. In a federal courtroom that has been gripping the public, a surprise witness stunned the courtroom. Chewy Thompson, who claims to be Elvis Presley's grandson, took the stand and presented a never-before-seen video in which he said Elvis appeared in a state of shock at a party hosted by Melvin Combs, the father of Sean "Diddy" Combs. According to his testimony, Chewy said he was invited to a modern-day party where he had a shocking experience that led to a confrontation with Diddy. He claimed he reacted strongly because what I saw was too much. As Chewy recounted the story, Sean Combs' eyes remained fixed on him, creating a tense atmosphere in the courtroom. "I'm not a celebrity, I'm not a politician, I'm not a media person," Chewy told the court. "I'm just a grandson carrying on his grandfather's untold story." His testimony wasn't just part of the trial. It was part of what he called the truth that's been buried for decades. According to Chewy, Elvis once mentioned to Priscilla Presley a strange series of events that took place in the early 1970s. The exclusive parties held in Los Angeles and Miami were not just parties. They were unlike anything he had ever known, cold and dark, Chewy recalled his grandfather saying. A central part of the testimony revolved around a mysterious figure, Melvin Combs, who was described as having influence in the entertainment world and deep connections in the upper echelons of power. Chewy said his grandfather was drawn into a complex world far beyond the stage and the spotlight that people knew. Chewy's story is not meant to be incriminating, but to shine a light on a previously unknown side of a grandfather, a musical icon, and the secrets he carried with him until the end of his life. In a high-profile federal court hearing, Chewy Thompson, who claims to be the grandson of music legend Elvis Presley, continued to testify, based on what he said was evidence gathered from family and private sources. Chewy said he felt drawn early on into a world where power was exchanged for silence, fear, and forms of control that no one dared to name. Chewy said he first met Melvin Combs, the father of Sean Diddy Combs, through connections in the music industry. But that relationship quickly turned from admiration to concern. "It's a world you don't walk into freely, but once you're in, you can't get out," he said. Chewy describes Melvin as more than just a behind-the-scenes influencer. He said he was a man who had connections to powerful forces, from entertainment to financial forces to even secret networks. This, Chewy said, put Melvin in a position of control rather than collaboration with artists like Elvis. A notable part of the testimony was when Chewy mentioned real estate properties that Melvin allegedly owned in California and Florida, which were described as the locations of special gatherings internally known as Red Doors. Chewy asserted that these events were not just parties, they were tests of human limits, where fame did not protect anyone, but only made them more vulnerable. According to the account, Elvis attended one of these gatherings reluctantly. Chewy quoted what his brother had said, that Elvis felt he was not the guest of honor, but a symbol to legitimize events he had no interest in being involved in. Chewy's testimony included some of Elvis's personal notes that described his panic, anguish, and feelings of being trapped in an alien world. In an excerpt from an old diary, Chewy read aloud to the court, "If I leave, they will destroy me. If I stay, I will not be myself." He continued, "My grandfather used to say, these are not parties, these are traps. Traps designed not to entertain, but to observe, manipulate, and control." Chewy concluded his testimony with a statement that was not directed at any individual, but had profound implications. "I am not here to judge. I am here to tell a forgotten story, not to hurt, but to free." Chewy Thompson testified that he believed Elvis Presley was put in extremely stressful situations and denied freedom of choice. He claimed that there was a staged process where Elvis was put into a vulnerable state with stimulants, and from there he was observed and recorded without any clear purpose. Chewy went on to share that he had found a safe hidden in Graceland, containing personal documents including letters and damaged video footage, many of which bore notable names, some of whom are still active in the entertainment industry today. Chewy paused, then handed a USB device to the prosecution. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. On the screen, a grainy image appeared. A time-stamped clip from July 1974 began to play. The scene showed a lavish mansion, with masked guests moving silently by candlelight in a space that was both luxurious and mysterious. The camera gradually zooms in on a clearer image. Elvis Presley, sitting hunched over in an armchair, his eyes glazed over. Next to him is a man who appears to be Melvin Combs. There's no music, no laughter, just tense silence. The shot silences the courtroom. The vague, unintelligible whispers in the video add to the unease. Chewy faces the judge and says plainly, "This is why I'm here today. This is the part of the story that few people dare touch. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the pressure my grandfather couldn't take anymore." He mentions a mysterious detail. A helicopter flew over Graceland the night Elvis died. Maybe now we know why. He turns to Sean Diddy Combs, who is sitting at the defense table. "You know, because you've been told. But instead of stopping, you kept it going." The air in the room became tense. The prosecutor played the next clip. A black and white image damaged by time appeared on the screen. The timestamp was clear, July 19th, 1974. In the lower corner of the frame, the name of the estate was smudged in ink, Bel Air, California. The footage began with the dim light of candles, Not romantic, but ritualistic, slow, and somewhat cold. The figures in the frame moved through a marble hall wearing masquerade masks. The background music was instrumental, not Elvis, but something dark and haunting. The camera panned across a large room, a ballroom it seemed. Some people sat, others stood, and some ushered others behind curtains. At the end of the frame, the camera stops. Elvis Presley, clearly him, sits quietly in a gold-framed chair. Dressed in a formal suit, his face is sweaty, his eyes wavering. Next to him is Melvin, smiling and holding a cigar. At one point, he leans toward Elvis, whispering something. Elvis flinches slightly. "He's not himself," Chewie says, as the screen freezes on Elvis's face. "You're seeing an icon, but you're actually seeing a man who's been imprisoned inside his own life." Chewie says the footage was left in a Graceland archive, buried among old fan footage. Elvis never spoke about it, but he never destroyed it either, as if he wanted the truth to come out someday. The video cuts to a dark hallway. A young girl walks past the camera, head bowed. A voice, Chewie assumes it's Melvin's, calls someone's name. Then silence. No one in the courtroom spoke. One juror raised a hand to his mouth. Another looked away. Diddy looked down at the table, clearly confused. He leaned toward his attorney, muttering something nervously. Chewie kept his composure, turned his gaze to Diddy, and said, "You recognize that place, right?" The room was silent. "Because you kept using it." Chewie concluded his testimony by emphasizing that this wasn't just about past images, but the aftermath that spanned decades, a series of events that left scars not just on the people involved, but on those who inherited the story. What happened to Elvis after that 1974 party and similar events that followed left more than just a physical scar. It was an irreparable rift within the spirit of a once universally beloved artist. The man who once sang of love, loss, and the yearning for freedom seemed to have lost himself. In his final years, according to Chewie, Elvis was no longer the man the public knew. He was quiet, withdrawn, and deep down seemingly lost. Chewie says that in 1976, after a party in Palm Springs that was described as particularly unsettling, Elvis returned home with a distant look in his eyes. He told Priscilla something that Chewie says the family never forgot. "I saw something, a devil in silk, and it knew my name." The words seemed to hint at something beyond imagination, an experience that left a deep mark. Chewie also shared previously unpublished excerpts from Elvis's private diaries. In one entry written just 3 weeks before his death, Elvis wrote, "They told me that silence was the price of peace. But how can there be peace when what I know won't let me sleep? They have the tapes. They have the files. They control how the story is told." And then came the final sentence, which silenced the courtroom. "I can't fight them, but maybe someday my blood will speak." According to Chewie, Elvis's final years were a series of silent escapes. He turned to drugs, not for recreation, but as a desperate attempt to forget. The people he once trusted, from entertainment moguls to influential figures, seemed to have become walls around him, leaving him with no way out. The media system was not his ally, Chewie said. If Elvis had spoken, his words would not have been preserved. They would have been edited, even buried. At the conclusion of his testimony, Chewie revealed a detail that left the courtroom speechless. Just a week before his death, Elvis had a conversation with a family member. "If anything happens to you," Elvis reportedly said, "don't trust the headlines, and don't trust anyone in a suit." On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found dead. The official cause was a heart attack linked to his drug use, but according to Chewie, that's not the whole story. "He didn't die of one single cause," Chewie said. "It was the weight of things that were never allowed to be said, of fear, of isolation, of silence that went on for too long." He paused, his eyes looking out into the room. "We have not only lost an artist, we have lost a witness." Years later, Chewie thought his family's dark past was buried in time until he unexpectedly received an invitation from a prominent music producer to a private event in Los Angeles in 2022. Things began to get strange when he realized the venue was a familiar mansion. There, he was offered a drink he never asked for. Several strange women whispered about a mysterious gold room upstairs. And then he appeared, in the middle of the party as if he were hosting, his eyes sweeping over everyone with a quiet authority. Chewy says he witnessed the man pulling a young man into the hallway, not out of intimacy or direction, but out of control. The boy looked scared. Chewy stepped forward, telling the man to stop. The man turned and said, "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Chewy replied, "I know. This is where my grandfather was hurt, and I'm not going to let that happen again." The room fell silent. Chewy testified that a scuffle ensued. A loud bang was heard, and everyone was startled. Remarkably, security did not intervene. They just stood there as if taken by surprise. The man left the event, and no legal action was taken, but to Chewy, the message was clear. "I'm not like my grandfather," he said in court. "I'm not going to keep quiet about what I know." He looked straight at the man who had lost his usual confidence. "You should know that wounds have memories, and my blood never forgets," Chewy asserted. Though he thought leaving the party was the end of it, he soon discovered that things weren't that simple. Chewy said he received a series of strange calls the next morning, along with text messages warning him to keep quiet. He initially ignored them, but within days the incidents escalated. His car was vandalized, and a family member received a fake call from the hospital saying he had been in a serious accident. Chewy described it as a form of psychological warfare. "They weren't trying to hurt me directly," he said, "but rather to break me in some other way, like my grandfather had." He told the court that he began to notice strange connections. The venue for the event was still under his ex's control, and the person who took his phone at the door was also connected to the organizers. Chewy believes none of this was a coincidence. Chewy insists that the party was more than an impromptu gathering. For him, it was a ritual, a continuation of something ancient and dark. But it wasn't the warnings or the furtive actions that broke him. Everything changed when he stumbled upon an old cassette tape while digging through the archives at Graceland. On the unlabeled tape was a familiar voice, quiet and broken, that of Elvis Presley himself. "If anything happens to me, don't let them twist the truth," the voice said. "Don't let them blame it on drugs or weakness. They drove me to the edge with cameras, with secrets. And Melvin, he said one day his son would replace me, and I would be a footnote in history." The recording made Chewy choke up, but it also reassured him. His legacy might be tainted by lies, but it wouldn't be for him. With that determination, he contacted a lawyer, approached prosecutors, and agreed to testify. Not for attention, not to sound like a victim, but to expose a system of power that had operated silently for too long without being questioned. When Chewy finished his testimony, the judge allowed him to make one final statement before the cross-examination began. What he did next was more than just words. It was a moment of truth. Chewy pulled a sealed envelope from his pocket, inside of which was a private investigator's typescript. The document listed witness statements, previously unseen video logs, and internal messages that showed a group of people discussing how to control the narrative around Chewy. He read one line aloud. "If he can link Elvis to the original version of the freak-off, we're all screwed. He must be stopped, discredited, even eliminated." The courtroom was stunned. One juror blurted out, "Oh my God!" Chewy looked directly at the man on trial. "You didn't just inherit the fortune," he said. "You inherited the darkest parts of your father." But that wasn't all. Chewy continued. "In the Graceland archives, we found a sealed envelope sent to the FBI in 1975 but never arrived. Inside it was a list of people Elvis said attended Melvin Combs's freak-off events. He read the names from the list: Clive Davis, Quincy Jones, Russell Simmons, and the last line, handwritten, "Melvin said one day his son would take over." Chewy submitted the letter to the court. The handwriting was verified. The postmark was authentic. The letter had never been sent. Then he asked permission to present one last piece of evidence, a photo. On the screen appeared a black and white image of Diddy as a child, about 9 years old, standing in the hallway of the mansion, captured in a 1974 video. He didn't just carry on the legacy. He grew up in it, Chewie said. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters rushed out to deliver the news. Diddy's attorneys immediately moved to have the evidence removed from the record, but it was too late. The public had seen it. The jury had seen it. And Diddy's image, once an untouchable symbol, was now tied to a series of events that spanned generations, shrouded in mystery that has never been explained. As Chewie stepped off the witness stand, the courtroom froze. Not a sound, not a movement. Diddy sat silently, his jaw clenched, his hands shaking slightly, his eyes fixed on the tile floor. For the first time, the mask of power cracked, not with anger, not with pride, but with the heavy stillness of someone who knows it's all over. Just a few feet away, Chewie paused. Before the jury, the press, and millions watching live around the world, he spoke one last time. You said there's no party like Diddy's party. But I saw what really happens when the music stops, when the door closes. My grandfather saw it too, and it broke him. He paused. You turned an entire industry into your playground. But every playground has its limits. Every king falls from his throne, and every secret, sooner or later, must come out into the light. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a heartbeat. And then Chewie said quietly, "Today you didn't just lose your empire. You lost the silence you once controlled." The judge nodded in acknowledgement. This testimony would live forever in the public record. As Chewie turned to leave the stand, Diddy finally raised his head. Their eyes met. Not a word, but a history understood in a moment. Chewie looked at him one last time, not angry, not proud, just the eyes of a man who had an unforgettable memory. And then, after generations of silence, the truth roared. Chewie walked through the crowd of reporters, microphones, and flashing lights, but he didn't stop. He just whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "Rest in peace, Grandpa." What needed to be said had been said. Behind him, inside the courtroom, Diddy sat, no longer a symbol of power, but a shadow in an expensive suit, surrounded by lawyers, but completely alone. Because for the first time, the truth was louder than fame. As Chewie walked through the courthouse doors and into the sunlight, the noise came like a waterfall. Cameras clicked like bullets. Reporters shouted for comment. Protesters held up signs. "Defend the truth. Justice for Elvis." But Chewie said nothing. He just kept walking, like a man with nothing left to prove. Meanwhile, journalists scrambled to take pictures, some wondering if this moment would shake the industry. Others wondered, how deep did the corruption go? But inside the courthouse, Diddy sat still. His lawyers whispered, plotting a course of action. But no matter the strategy, no media team can erase the image that has just been etched into the minds of the American public. Elvis Presley's grandson stood in court, accusing one of hip-hop's most powerful figures of tarnishing the family's legacy. Back at Graceland, Chewie's family waited patiently. He told them everything, from tapes to letters to voicemails. But it was only when he walked through that door that they realized the full extent of what he had done. He wasn't just defending Elvis's name. He was freeing it from decades of speculation, shallow documentaries, and lingering lies. That night, Chewie stood silently in Elvis's old music room. One hand gently touched the grand piano, the same one his grandfather had played on sleepless nights. Then he lit a small candle, a warm flame to close the painful past. "They didn't erase you, Grandpa," he whispered. "They just paused the story." And today, I'm going to hit replay. Behind him, a photo of Elvis smiles brightly. No longer a ghost of the past, but a legend finally heard. Thank you for following this story. Let's continue to hold the truth and honor the legacy, because that's how we honor those who have gone before.